Part of my life has been involved in the development of professional relationships that have developed into very important friendships. This started in the late 1970s when I was asked to serve on the doctoral dissertation committee for Rick Miner, a graduate student in anthropology at the University of Oregon. Rick was doing his dissertation research on prehistory of the lower Columbia River estuary. At the same time, I was working with the Chinook Indian tribe, the historical successors to the villages in that area. And Rick and I very soon developed a professional working relationship. He and his wife, Dr. Kathryn and Toepel, both archaeologists, created a company called Heritage Research Associates in Eugene, Oregon. And for the last 45 years, they have engaged in extensive archaeological and cultural resource assessments. And they brought me on board as one of their associates. The projects that we've worked on have been really intriguing. In the 1980s, we wrote several cultural resource overviews, or historical, archaeological, and ethnographic assessments for federal agencies. These included the Ochco National Forest, Willamette National Forest, Siskiyou National Forest, the Prineville BLM district, the Salem BLM district. These were studies to help the federal agencies come to terms with the mandates of the National Historic Preservation Act and Archaeological Resources Protection. In time, Rick and I did a lot of teamwork. He was the field archaeologist doing the excavation and testing, and I was the background researcher. So we did studies at Fort Orford on the southern Oregon coast, at Fort Cascades, Fort Range, Fort Luganville, and Fort Vancouver on the Columbia River. These were projects that dealt with the pre-Civil War presence of these U.S. military posts that I documented through extensive research and many days at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And then I would merge the textual records, the post returns, the cartographic and sometimes photographic information with the artifacts that Rick and his team were recovering on the ground. Quite a number of these projects were driven by the navigation lock and the new North Bonneville powerhouse in the Columbia Gorge by the Army Corps of Engineers. Altogether, I believe I did 10 reports, most of them co-authored with Rick or with Rick and Kathy that related to that section of the Western Columbia Gorge. We did a study of early historic railroad development for the portage lines on both the north and south banks of the Columbia River. I did a study of the pioneer fish hatchery, the first state of Oregon fish hatchery that was located at Bonneville in the gorge. So these were interesting projects. Probably the biggest of all was a site that Rick did not excavate. It was a site on the north bank of the river in Skamania County called 45SA11. Several hundreds of thousands of artifacts came out of that site. And the Texas firm that had the contract to excavate it was unable to carry through with the artifact analysis. So Rick, Kathy, and I were brought on board by the Corps of Engineers. We hired a team of graduate students at the University of Oregon, and eventually the artifacts were identified, curated, and we wrote a major report on cultural investigations at 45SA11, an unnamed but major village site on the north bank of the Columbia River at Bonneville. Other projects have involved the Willamette Valley. Rick and I did a project on the Burnside Bridge, which is soon to be replaced in Portland with a new major project that will take 4 to 5 years to build. We worked at the Thomas Roy donation land claim, now the site of the giant Amazon warehouse at Woodburn, Oregon. The artifacts from that claim date back to the 1830s and the 1840s on French prairie. We also worked on the Big Digger, the Big Tunnel Project, the massive utility tunnel that was drilled under the river through downtown Portland, back under the river, and back out toward the Columbia River to transport wastewater and gray water and rain runoff in a more efficient way than overflowing into the Willamette River. So these are just some of maybe 30 some projects that I worked on with Rick and Kathy. They were wonderful collaborators, very much collegial in spirit, two really bright people, and they enriched my life tremendously with the research and writing opportunities that resulted in the many reports that we produced through Heritage Research Associates.